900 kilometers. That's how many miles of new road Burkina Faso built in just 90 days. No foreign contractors, no Western aid. Every stretch of asphalt, every bridge, every culvert was laid by local hands. For a country long ranked among the poorest in the world, this was not just a public works project. It was a statement to the entire globe: we can do this ourselves. In Ouagadougou, the capital, the air still carries the smell of fresh tar. Along one of these new roads, 64-year-old farmer Issa watches trucks roll past with a look of disbelief. For decades, he had to push his goods on a cart through rough dirt paths to reach the market. Now, for the first time in his life, he can make the trip in under an hour. "I thought I would die before I saw this," he says quietly. At the center of it all is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old leader who took power promising to restore security and sovereignty. The road project was bold, expensive, and risky, but it was also personal. Roads mean faster troop movement to fight insurgents, quicker delivery of food and medicine, and a tangible symbol that the country is no longer waiting for permission from Paris or Washington to act. Yet, behind the celebration lies a question that divides the nation. Will this determination to go it alone save Burkina Faso, or will it push the country toward dangerous isolation? For every supporter who sees Traoré as a modern-day savior, there is a skeptic who fears the backlash from powerful global players. Before we dive deeper, consider this: what does it mean for a small, landlocked African nation to defy the international order and chart its own course? And more importantly, what price will it have to pay? If the future of Africa matters to you, stay with me, because what happened in these 90 days could reshape not only Burkina Faso's destiny, but the balance of power in the Sahel. It began quietly without fanfare. On a hot January morning, bulldozers rolled into rural provinces far from the capital. Orders had been signed just days earlier by Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself: 900 kilometers of new roads to be completed in exactly 90 days. The scale of the project stunned even his own ministers. The target was not just ambitious, it bordered on the impossible. The reasoning was clear. For years, Burkina Faso's infrastructure had been neglected, leaving entire regions cut off. Insurgents thrived in these disconnected areas, able to strike villages and disappear into the bush before security forces could respond. Roads would change that. They would allow troops to reach trouble spots in hours instead of days, deliver food and medicine to isolated communities, and connect farmers to markets that could pay fair prices for their crops. The logistics were staggering. Over 12,000 workers were deployed: engineers, soldiers, and civilian laborers, supported by more than 800 heavy machines. The government diverted funds from non-essential programs, freeing up an estimated $210 million for the project. To save costs, they sourced materials locally and relied on the army's logistical network instead of foreign contractors. Every kilometer built without foreign aid was another political victory for Traoré's promise of self-reliance. In the northern town of Djibo, 58-year-old shopkeeper Awa recalled how her deliveries used to take 3 weeks to arrive. "Sometimes I had to close my store because nothing could get through," she said. Just 2 months into the project, a newly paved road reached her town for the first time in its history. She wept as she watched the first convoy of trucks pull in. "I didn't believe it until I saw it," she admitted. The pace was relentless. Crews worked in shifts around the clock. In the evenings, campfires dotted the roadside as workers rested before the next stretch. Soldiers provided security, ensuring that insurgents couldn't sabotage the work. Even so, there were attacks. 2 convoys were ambushed in February, resulting in 4 soldiers killed and 8 wounded. The incidents only hardened the resolve of the workers and the public. "We bury our dead, and we keep building," one foreman told a local radio station. By the 60th day, more than 600 kilometers were complete. The progress was visible from space. Satellite images showed new ribbons of asphalt cutting across the dusty landscape. In villages where the road crews passed, children waved and elders blessed them. Local radio programs played patriotic songs praising the project. But while the atmosphere on the ground was charged with optimism, whispers of concern began circulating among political observers. Building roads at such speed required enormous financial sacrifice, pulling resources from other pressing needs. Fuel subsidies were temporarily reduced, public sector projects postponed, and the treasury was running tighter than ever. Foreign investors began to worry that Traoré's defiance of Western aid could make Burkina Faso a risky place to do business. The completion deadline approached with almost military precision. On the 89th day in a rural stretch near the Ghana border, the final layer of asphalt was laid. That evening, Traoré flew in by helicopter to walk the last few meters with the workers. Cameras captured him, shaking hands, his military cap pulled low, the setting sun, casting a long shadow over the brand-new blacktop. The symbolism was unmistakable, a young leader delivering on his promise despite global doubt. Yet this success was more than just a domestic headline. It was a challenge to the established order. In a region where infrastructure projects are almost always tied to foreign loans, aid packages, and political strings, Burkina Faso had just proven it could chart its own path. Supporters hailed it as a turning point for African sovereignty. Critics warned it could provoke economic and political retaliation from powerful nations with vested interests in the Sahel. And that leads to the question no one could yet answer. Was this the start of a new era of independence, or the first step toward a dangerous confrontation? The climax came on a bright April morning exactly 90 days after the first bulldozer moved. The final road segment linking a strategic military outpost to the southern trade corridor was finished at dawn. By mid-morning, thousands of citizens had gathered along the fresh pavement. They waved the red, green, and yellow flag of Burkina Faso, singing songs that had not been heard in public squares for decades. Some wore shirts bearing the image of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Others carried handwritten signs that read simply, "We did it ourselves." The government staged an official inauguration, but it felt less like a ceremony and more like a national rally. Traoré stepped out of his convoy, greeted not just by ministers and generals, but by farmers, shopkeepers, and schoolchildren. His speech was direct and defiant. "We built these roads with our own hands, our own sweat, and our own will. No one will tell us how to govern our land." The crowd erupted, chanting his name. The moment was captured on state television and broadcast across Africa. For many, this was the emotional high point, the instant when the years of hardship seemed to give way to a vision of unity and pride. In the crowd, 72-year-old veteran Solimane wiped tears from his face. "I fought for this country when it was still finding its way," he said. "Today I see the future we dreamed of." But not everyone was celebrating. Within hours of the event, political analysts in Paris, London, and Washington issued statements questioning the sustainability of such rapid development without foreign support. Western media framed the project as a risky gamble, highlighting the possibility of economic collapse if Burkina Faso overextended itself. French commentators openly wondered whether Traoré's growing alliance with Mali and Niger signaled a deeper geopolitical shift away from Western influence. Inside Burkina Faso, opposition figures accused the government of using the road project as propaganda to distract from ongoing security challenges. They argued that while roads could improve military mobility, they could also become targets for insurgents. Within days, a section of the new highway in the north was damaged by an improvised explosive device. No one was killed, but the incident fueled both fear and political debate. Still, the dominant mood among the public was one of victory. State radio played patriotic music for an entire week, and local markets buzzed with conversations about the future. Parents told their children that this was the moment they would remember when asked about the day Burkina Faso stood up for itself. Internationally, the images of Traoré walking shoulder to shoulder with workers, his uniform dusty from the construction site, circulated widely on social media. In parts of West Africa, he was hailed as an icon of resistance against neo-colonialism. In others, He was seen as a dangerous figure willing to provoke powerful nations in pursuit of sovereignty. The sheer speed and scale of the project had created a story that could not be ignored. Whether viewed as triumph or recklessness, it had cemented Traoré's place on the global stage. And for those in Burkina Faso, the roads were proof that action could replace promises, that a determined leader could deliver concrete results in record time. Yet beneath the celebration and the defiance, a darker question loomed, one that no one was ready to answer. When a small nation takes such a bold stand, how long before the world decides to push back? Will the world act in time, and what will happen to Burkina Faso when it does? In the weeks following the grand inauguration, the new roads began transforming daily life across Burkina Faso. In villages that had been isolated for years, children could now reach schools in nearby towns without walking for hours. Medical clinics started receiving supplies on time, and farmers transported their harvests to market before they spoiled. The economic ripple effect was immediate. Local traders reported a 25% increase in sales within the first month, and bus companies opened new routes, connecting regions that had long been cut off. But the benefits came with costs. To fund the project, the government had reduced fuel subsidies, paused some public housing programs, and diverted funds from non-critical ministries. For those already struggling, this meant higher fuel prices and fewer social services. In Ouagadougou's outskirts, 43-year-old single mother Fatou described how her monthly expenses had risen by nearly 15%. "I'm proud of the roads," she said, "but I'm worried about paying for cooking gas and school fees." Her words reflected the quiet concern spreading among working families. On the political front, the project significantly boosted Traoré's popularity. Opinion polls conducted by independent media showed his approval rating jumping from 58% to 78% nationwide. His image as a decisive, results-driven leader resonated with citizens tired of decades of corruption and dependency on foreign aid. His government leveraged this momentum to push for new regional defense pacts with Mali and Niger, aiming to strengthen military cooperation against insurgent groups. However, the political shift also deepened tensions with traditional allies in the West. French development agencies froze certain aid programs, citing concerns over governance. The European Union issued a statement warning that Burkina Faso's economic trajectory could be at risk without diversified partnerships. In Washington, the State Department placed Burkina Faso under review for certain military assistance programs, noting strategic alignment concerns. Inside the country, opposition parties accused Traoré of consolidating too much power and using national pride as a shield against legitimate criticism. They pointed to increased military spending and the creation of a special development fund managed directly by the presidency as signs of creeping authoritarianism. Parliament debates grew heated, with some lawmakers demanding an independent audit of the road project's finances. Security remained a pressing challenge. While the roads improved troop mobility, they also became potential targets. Within 2 months, there were 3 separate incidents where sections of the new highway were damaged by explosives planted by insurgents. In one case, a bus carrying civilians hit a roadside bomb, killing 6 and injuring 11. The tragedy sparked nationwide mourning and reignited the debate over whether large infrastructure projects could be adequately protected in conflict-prone areas. Internationally, the new roads became symbolic in diplomatic discourse. For Pan-Africanists, they were proof that African nations could take control of their destinies. For critics, they were a reminder that defying the established global economic order often comes at a price. At the African Union summit that summer, Traoré's speech calling for an Africa that builds with African hands received thunderous applause from some delegations and stony silence from others. Families felt the changes in ways statistics couldn't capture. In a small northern village, 67-year-old grandfather Musa told his grandchildren stories about how in his youth it would take 2 days by foot to reach the nearest city. Now he said they could travel there in under 2 hours. But when asked if he thought the roads would last, Musa hesitated. "It depends," he said softly. "If the world lets us keep them." The roads had become more than infrastructure. They were now political tools, symbols of sovereignty, and potential flashpoints in a larger geopolitical game. They improved lives, yes, but they also exposed the country to new vulnerabilities, both internal and external. But how will the United States respond to a small African nation reshaping its destiny without their blessing? In Washington, the mood was cautious. U.S. officials acknowledged the remarkable speed and scale of Burkina Faso's road project, but questioned the political implications. Analysts at the Pentagon and State Department noted that enhanced mobility could strengthen Burkina Faso's military capabilities not just against insurgents, but in ways that might shift regional power dynamics in the Sahel. With Mali and Niger already aligning closely with Ouagadougou, U.S., strategists worried about the emergence of a bloc less receptive to Western influence and more open to partnerships with Russia or China. The intelligence community began tracking developments more closely, focusing on potential foreign involvement behind the scenes. Was Burkina Faso truly funding and executing the project entirely on its own, or were there discrete agreements with non-Western powers? The question carried weight in security briefings, given the Sahel's role as a buffer zone against extremist expansion toward coastal West Africa. In Europe, reactions varied. France, historically the dominant foreign player in Burkina Faso, saw the project as a clear rejection of its influence. French media outlets portrayed Traoré's infrastructure push as politically motivated warning of possible financial collapse. Meanwhile, some EU member states called for a pragmatic approach, suggesting new trade and security arrangements rather than punitive measures. Across Africa, the response was far more enthusiastic. Leaders from Ghana, Senegal, and Tanzania publicly praised the achievement as proof that African nations could deliver on ambitious projects without foreign dependency. Pan-African activists seized on the moment to rally support for a continental shift away from traditional aid-based models. American media coverage was mixed. Outlets focused on foreign affairs emphasized the geopolitical implications, while some domestic commentators drew parallels to debates about infrastructure investment in the U.S. itself. A few voices in Congress even suggested that the U.S. should find ways to collaborate with Traoré's government, arguing that alienating Burkina Faso could push it further toward rival powers. For the average American viewer, the story was both distant and oddly familiar. A small nation striving for self-reliance caught between the promise of progress and the pull of global politics. Yet, beneath the headlines, the core question lingered: would the United States adapt to a new Sahel reality or try to preserve the old order? And if this is the beginning of a larger shift in Africa, could it also be the start of a crisis the world is not ready to face? The celebration of 900 kilometers of new roads is already fading into the background of Burkina Faso's daily struggles. While the project has inspired hope and pride, it has also drawn the attention of powerful nations and exposed the country to new forms of pressure. Security analysts warn that the Sahel remains one of the most volatile regions in the world, where infrastructure can be both a lifeline and a target. If insurgent groups increase their attacks, or if foreign powers decide to reassert influence, the hard-won progress could unravel quickly. The warning signs are already there. A coordinated sabotage campaign could disrupt critical supply lines. Economic sanctions from key trade partners could strain the national budget. If regional allies like Mali and Niger face their own internal crises, Burkina Faso could find itself isolated just when it needs support the most. The margin for error is slim. In the months that followed, the new roads became more than lines of asphalt. They became arteries of connection, pumping new life into regions long forgotten. Markets that had once been half-empty were now bustling with traders, farmers, and buyers from distant provinces. Goods that used to spoil before reaching buyers, fresh mangoes, tomatoes, fish from inland rivers, were now arriving fresh, commanding higher prices. For the first time, many families saw their household income rise not because of foreign charity, but because of their own work. Teachers reported higher attendance rates in rural schools as children no longer had to wade through mud or navigate dangerous dirt tracks. Small clinics, once understocked and barely functional, began receiving regular deliveries of medicine and equipment. Ambulances could now reach patients in time, turning what would have been funerals into recovery stories. But the roads also changed the rhythm of life in more subtle ways. In the evenings, roadside tea stalls sprang up where workers and travelers met, sharing news from other parts of the country. Young people inspired by the project's success began talking about starting their own businesses, convinced that the new infrastructure would support their ambitions. "We feel like we're part of the same country now," said 22-year-old student Amadou, who can now visit his family in the countryside on weekends. Still, everyone knew that roads could not erase all problems. Security convoys continued to patrol key routes, and tension lingered in certain regions where insurgent activity persisted. Some villagers feared that as the roads opened access to their communities, they might also open the door to greater threats. The government responded with promises of integrated security plans, joint patrols, local defense initiatives, and community watch programs to protect both people and infrastructure. Whether these measures will be enough remains uncertain, but for now, the sense of pride outweighs the fear. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the project has become a defining chapter in his leadership. Supporters believe it proves that determination, unity, and self-reliance can change a nation's course. Critics remain unconvinced, warning that the true test lies not in building roads, but in maintaining them both physically and politically over the years to come. And yet for many in Burkina Faso, the project has ignited a sense of possibility. They see it as proof that a determined nation can take control of its destiny even under immense pressure. The question now is whether that momentum can be sustained or whether it will collapse under the weight of geopolitical realities. So we are left with a choice of interpretation. Is Captain Ibrahim Traoré the embodiment of Africa's long-awaited independence, or is he a leader steering his country toward dangerous waters? Will these roads carry the people of Burkina Faso toward stability and prosperity, or lead them straight into the crosshairs of global power struggles? If the African military alliance fails to strengthen in the next 3 months, Burkina Faso could be left standing alone in the face of mounting external pressure. And history shows that isolation in the Sahel often comes with a heavy price. Perhaps the real measure of this moment will not be in the kilometers of road laid, but in whether this young leader can navigate the treacherous terrain of both domestic expectations and international politics. If this story has touched your heart, let it live beyond this moment. Share it in your conversations, reflect on what sovereignty truly costs, and keep Burkina Faso in your prayers. For those who believe in justice, dignity, and a rising Africa, remember, hope is built not in comfort, but in the courage to stand alone. May God bless Africa, the land of strength, hope, and an unbreakable will.